Welcome to 30-Minute Reviews. I am Adam, and I forgot to turn off the headphone thing. I don't think there's any reverberation. I was having a reverberation issue earlier. I think I fixed it. But in any case, here we are with this week's episode. So let's lead off with our first news story of the week. Zack Snyder once again descended from his throne to editorialize the release of Justice League back when that happened. Now, you may know that he, much like J.K. Rowling, has been continuing to add in things that were not in the Justice League movie originally, and saying, oh, that was going to be in it. That was going to be in the quote-unquote Snyder Cut. Here's the thing. I don't believe him. And I've had suspicions about the accuracy of what he said he was going to do for a while now. I've had my suspicions ever since he had the statement that he was going to make the Martian Manhunter was going to be in the movie the whole time, disguised as the General starting in Man of Steel. Here's the thing. A lot of the things that he said are going to happen or were going to happen in Justice League or in Justice League Part 2 or in Part 3 are contradicted by VFX artists who have been on the record saying, I read the script, I read the outlines, I know what was going to happen in the future movies, and I worked on this movie, so I know what was there. And they came out and said that. And really, that was the thing that kind of fueled the fire on the Snyder Cut, and that really started. It was these VFX artists saying, I worked on a very different movie than the one that came out in theaters. What I worked on, X, Y, and Z, is what I worked on. I worked on the Green Lantern being there. The Green Lantern was in the third act initially. There was other things happening besides just what we saw here. The issue is that I don't think that he really came up with these ideas as they were happening. So let's break down what the original plan was. And again, this is from memory because this was on an interview on, at the time, Fat Man on Batman, that Kevin Smith and Mark Bernardin did at the Scum and Villainy Cantina, where they had a VFX artist come in and say, this is what I worked on. And he had read, I believe, the script for Justice League Part 2, and he had read the outline for Justice League Part 3. Basically what he said was that Justice League Part 1 was going to be like the Avengers, where Steppenwolf was to come, kind of lay the groundwork for what was going to happen on Earth, try to take the mother boxes, and, then go back to Apocalypse with the mother boxes. Then he fails. His severed head gets sent back to Apocalypse through a boom tube, lands at Darkseid's feet. We would have seen Darkseid. The VFX artist said that Darkseid was developed for the movie, but he didn't make it into the final movie. Now, the sequel would have been Darkseid coming to Earth with his armies of parademons and, just raising the planet. And we would have gotten the Nightmare world that we got in Batman v Superman, in the Flash, in the dream that Batman has before the Flash jumps in to show him the world. It's Lois. Lois is the key. That whole nightmare would have been Justice League Part 2, the world that's left at the end of Justice League Part 2, and it would have been raised by a Superman corrupted by the anti-life equation. All of this sounds really cool, and then Part 3 would have been the Justice League decorrupting Superman and going to Apocalypse to take the fight to Darkseid. That's the plot that was said to happen. This was back in 2017 or 2018. Now, the thing that really tipped me off this time was when Snyder said that what was going to happen in Part 2 and Part 3 was Part 2 was going to have the Justice League get defeated, and some of them would be dead, and then Part 3 would have the remaining members of the Justice League go back in time to try and resurrect their fallen allies. Now, that sounds, I would say, plagiaristically identical to Avengers Endgame. And really, if we want to, discuss this, That's not what you originally said. And what you originally said sounded really cool, and I would love to see it. I'm not against it. It's an interesting situation. I'd love to see how it works out. It seems very bleak, but you know what? Whatever. Release the movie. Let's not criticize the movie compared to what it should be or what we think it is in Elseworld. So we'll talk about it that way. But we're not going to, discuss that too much further now. And then there are other things, and it only ever happened after someone else did it. And if my timing is correct on one of them, like when they announced, Ryan Choi was supposed to be in Justice League. He was in this one scene. This scientist over here is Ryan Choi, and it's like, yeah, but was he though? Because like you made that announcement after they announced that Ryan Choi was going to be debuting in Crisis on Infinite Earths on the CW. So like, was that something that you were, looking forward? Like, is that something that you really had there? Like, and Martian Manhunter, you made the announcement that the black military guy was going to be Martian Manhunter after they did that on Supergirl. Really? It's just a coincidence that the CW ends up doing what you were going to do. Really? And you don't ever say that it was going to happen before it comes out. Really? Yeah, I don't believe it. So that's the thing is like Zack has a new movie coming out this year. He's got Army of Darkness, I think it's called. It's some zombie movie, and he's got a new movie coming out. He can use that to draw headlines, put out trailers, generate hype for that movie. Don't keep harping back to this one. It's kind of like someone who has he's got an extensive filmography of movies that were range from okay to not terrible, but like he keeps harping back to this one. It's like his white whale, where it's like that one was a failure, but that one was not my fault. I would have done it better had I had the chance. And this feels like him trying to vindicate that when really the movie we saw and what was described by people who worked on it, it doesn't feel like would have been too vastly different. Like putting the Green Lantern in the movie wouldn't have made the movie better. It just would have raised more of the same issues I already had with the movie. Because like with Justice League, the issue is you're trying to cram in too much stuff into one movie. There's too much stuff going on to begin with. That's the problem. When you look around the movie, you got like so many characters hadn't been introduced prior to that point that you have to do the groundwork to introduce these characters for an audience. And like to an extent, you can kind of hope that people coming in know who Barry Allen is because of the Flash TV show that ran both in 1990 and the one that's currently running on the CW. You can hope that you can use that as an origin. We don't have to sit here and show him getting struck by lightning and being thrown into the chemicals and, all of that. We don't. That's not necessary for the story. It's not necessary to show Barry interacting with his father in prison. And really, that was a scene I really liked in Justice League because what it does is it shows it's a way to ground his origin. It's like this is how you tell the story of Barry Allen. You have him go visit his father in Iron Heights, and now you know his origin. And that's all you need to know for this movie. Cyborg, there's a lot that goes into Cyborg's origin, and a lot of his origin plays into the plot of this movie. And that would have been a movie that would have been more helpful to have come out between Batman v Superman and Justice League than Wonder Woman would have been. Because you don't necessarily need a Wonder Woman backstory between those 2 points. We could have put that off until after, but you could have done a Wonder Woman origin after that. And did it that way. Aquaman, again, you don't really need an origin for Aquaman either. You kind of get what you need here. He goes to Atlantis briefly. He fights Steppenwolf who steals the mother box there. And then, that's the whole thing. And it's like, because of how much needed to be laid down, and then it's like, then we're going to add in on top of that, we're going to add in the Martian Manhunter possibly. And we're also going to add in the Atom, because Ryan Choi is there, and we're also going to add in the Green Lantern. That's far too much, and it was a good decision to cut those, if those were actually in development during the time the movie was in development, which there's no evidence suggests it actually was. But it's like, I said this before the movie came out, this movie's going to be over-bloated, because in order to tell a story, you need to be concise. As a novel, Justice League would have worked a lot better as a novel because then you can go through, you can tell the story of these characters. I have no reason to care about any of these characters because I don't know who they are besides their historical, their cultural impact they've had prior to this point as a DC fan. But as someone walking in off the street, the reason why Avengers worked where where Justice League didn't is because it didn't quite resonate properly with with the Avengers. We knew who everyone was. We knew their history, their pains, their victories. Every character, with the exception of Black Widow and except for Black Widow and Hawkeye, had origin movies prior to the Avengers. So we knew where they were coming from, and we knew why they were there, and what was bringing them and drawing them together to this team. Doing that on top of the actual movie you're trying to do in Justice League is a tall order. And that's the reason why the movie ultimately wasn't going to do well. And you can say, oh, we're going to make the movie a half hour longer or an hour longer, and we're going to add in a bunch of other stuff on top of it. No, adding in an extra half hour or an hour could have alleviated a lot of that strain. But if you're going to do that, plus add in Darkseid, plus add in all of this. And the other reason why the Avengers worked where this one didn't, and this is the exact example I said before, before the movie came out, when they announced that Steppenwolf was going to be the bad guy. Who is Steppenwolf to the average movie-going audience? No one really cares about who Steppenwolf is because he was never introduced prior, and it's a big leap to go right to Apocalypse at this point. Because you explain, oh, he's the uncle of Darkseid. Okay, who is Darkseid? And not Darkseid is. How does this work for me as someone who doesn't know DC? I know, me personally, I know DC. So I knew who Steppenwolf was. I knew what was going on with Steppenwolf, and I saw where they were going with this when they announced that. But let's look back at who the bad guy was in the Avengers. And really, them saying that Darkseid were going to show up at the end to be the one pulling the strings feels like the post-credit scene from the Avengers, where they show up and there's, and at the end of the movie, the other goes and he says that the humans on Earth are not to be taken lightly, to fight them is to court death. And then Thanos turns and smiles, and it tells you exactly where they're going, and that's what the Darkseid reveal feels like. But with the Avengers, Loki is funded by the other, and by extension, Thanos. Loki, we don't need to have an extended look at his motivation. We know his motivation because we had a movie prior exploring his motivation. It's his second appearance. Who is Loki? He's Thor's brother. What does Loki want to do? He wants to enslave the Earth. He feels he has a right to be king. We had an entire movie exploring the fact that he feels he has a right to be on a throne somewhere. And that was the point of Thor, is it illustrates that Loki feels that he has this right. So then when we go to the Avengers, we know this is an extension of that. And they can very quickly sum it up because they did that. With Steppenwolf, he's not tied to any of the prior characters, so you can't do that. You have to, still kind of explain what's going on, and it's not really done well. Adding in a half hour, again, could have helped that, but it also really wouldn't have done too much if you're doing that, and then also adding in a bunch of other stuff that doesn't need to happen anyway. So with the Snyder Cut, I'm look, I've said it before, and I've had people say, well, what I've always said about it is, based on the movie, there are big structural problems with the movie. And based on what I've seen of the movie when I've watched it, you can kind of tell what was added in by Joss Whedon. You can kind of look at the movie, and you can be like, okay, Joss Whedon added in this joke, he added in the joke of the Flash falling and landing face first on Wonder Woman's boobs. You can tell he was the one who added in the joke where Martha Kent calls Lois Lane thirsty. The Santa Claus screaming and cursing. Oh wait, no, Santa Claus screaming and cursing was in Shazam. It worked better in Shazam. The same joke happened in Justice League. It did not quite land as well. That was very obviously added in by Joss Whedon. You can tell what was there and what was added by Joss and what was not added by, and what was, not there. It looked like his bringing in of Joss Whedon, based on the movie we saw, was more to make it more like the Avengers. Bring in jokes, bring in his expertise leading a movie like this. Because, like it or not, he had already done 2 at that point, because he did Avengers and he did Age of Ultron. And Age of Ultron had mediocre reviews, but doing that would have been that's why they brought him in. Was to do that. And you can tell when you watch the movie that you can tell all of what's his name's stories there, but it's not quite there properly. And I don't think that extending the runtime would have necessarily saved that issue. That said, if the Snyder Cut of Justice League ever does get released, I'll watch it. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm not going to watch it. I am going to watch it when it comes out, if they ever put it out on HBO Max ever. But yeah, I'm not against it. Even if they do it if you watch the director's cut of the 1954, the Judy Garland version of A Star is Born, there are scenes that are not in the movie initially, in the theatrical version of the movie, because it's a director's cut, obviously. And when they do that, they didn't save the scenes either. So they use the audio tracks, which were saved, overlaid with pictures. And they do that where it's look at, if you have Disney Plus, if you're one of the 50 million people who have Disney Plus, go to Avengers Endgame and watch the deleted scene in the trench, where there are no effects there in that scene. There are no effects in it. It's all everyone in their motion capture suits very quickly running through the scene. And I think that's if the movie was released like that, I'd watch it, no problem, even if it was like that. But based on what happened with based on the movie, I don't think that there would have been too much to add on. Speaking of movies that had narrative failures, let's talk about this week's movie review, Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Now, here's the thing about Star Wars. I have always been a lifelong Star Wars fan. As a child, I saw what movies were out as a kid when they were in theaters. Those were prequels for me. I saw them in theaters, saw all the movies. Big into watching the Clone Wars TV show, read the books, played the video games. Huge into Star Wars. So Disney buys Star Wars. They announced Episodes 7, 8, and 9 are happening. I'm like, all right, let's go. Opening night for Episode 7 of Star Wars is one of those theater-going experiences that's going to last in my head, not just as the guy sitting next to me rocking back and forth saying, I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this when Han Solo dies, but it was an electric showing. Not the best showing I've ever been to. The best showing is probably going to end up being Endgame, because there's that clip going around of the audience reaction to Endgame, and, nothing. I don't think there's going to be another movie in my lifetime that quite gets that reaction that you got to Captain America fighting Thanos with Thor's hammer, or what's it called, or the portal scene. That did not stop Lucasfilm from trying, though. And here's the problem with this movie. Disney took a unique approach, or Lucasfilm took a unique approach, because from what I understand about how Disney works is that the Walt Disney Company as a whole is very hands-off to its subsidiaries. And what I mean by that is, Bob Iger and the creative team at Disney is not hands-on and telling Kevin Feige or Kathleen Kennedy what to do constantly. He just kind of takes a step back and lets them do their thing. They know what they do. That's their subsidiary. They run their company the way they want to. They report back to him, and then they have to answer to him in the event that something goes wrong. Now, with Star Wars, it took a unique approach. Typically, when you have a trilogy of movies that's going to be following one cohesive narrative arc, you do not take 3 different directors, 3 different writers, do not have them consult with each other, and have them all go in and do their own thing. And then have one of them make the Book of Henry in the middle of it, and then end up dropping him and going back to the first one. So now we have this whole movie happen, and we have JJ make the first one. When I say JJ make the first one, I mean he took the script from Episode 4, changed it slightly, and re-released it as The Force Awakens. And then, so that was, something. I'm not going to, take that away from them. It was something. It was certainly something. Not necessarily a good something. It was something. I mean, it's hard to say the movie's bad because it's something what I've seen before. So, the plot and everything like that, we know what's happening. We know what's, It's nothing different. It's just a thing that we have. Then he left it in a weird place. So then Rian Johnson comes in, and he's like, okay, based on where you left it, here is where I'm going to go with the story next. So then what happens is then Trevorrow was supposed to do part 3. Trevorrow, known for Jurassic World and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, and also for the Book of Henry, he is on to do part 3. So he writes part three of the sequel trilogy, calls it Duel of the Fates. He gets fired after Book of Henry. I don't know if it was because of Book of Henry or because they didn't like his draft, but whatever, he got fired. Having read that screenplay, I would have rather seen that than what we got, but that's neither here nor there. So now they bring back in J.J. Abrams. J.J. Abrams is going to do part 3. Here's the thing. You can tell from this movie that J.J. very much just wanted to do the entire trilogy himself, only signed on for the first one, and then when they signed on to it, he was like, all right, whatever. Now that he had the chance to end it the way he wanted, it seems kind of odd that you would put him in that situation, because J.J. Abrams is not known for sticking the landing on literally anything he's ever done. Every single TV show or movie he's been involved with has not ended well. And if we look at the other infuriating thing about this is, let's talk about the Rey Palpatine twist. The fact that Rey is a descendant of Palpatine. That was a popular fan theory coming out of The Force Awakens, because there was some YouTube video who talked about J.J. Abrams' mystery box as his narrative, structure for a movie, and how he likes to use that. It doesn't quite work in a Star Wars movie, because Star Wars isn't built around a mystery. Star Wars is a saga of good versus evil, where with very clear cut, with the exception of with the exception of bringing in the concept of gray, like the gray area of war that's brought in The Last Jedi. It's not really, a thing that's like that brings itself into having a mystery. It's not something that you watch and you're like, there's a big mystery that needs to be solved. It's not. It's like everything's laid out for you pretty clearly. There have been exceptions to this rule, mostly in the extended universe, but in the main saga of Star Wars, it's a story of how the Skywalker saga routinely fucks up the galaxy for the better part of 3 generations. And really, that was the big disconnect here from the beginning. Who is Rey related to? There was no question of who is Luke related to in 1977. The question wasn't who is Luke. People didn't care who Luke was related to. Outright, we were told Luke was related to Anakin Skywalker. His father was Anakin Skywalker, a Jedi as well. Then there was a twist in Episode 5 where it turned out that Anakin Skywalker had turned to the dark side and became Darth Vader. And then he also had a twin sister in Episode 6 where he's related to Leia. Here is the thing, though, about this whole situation. We didn't need a mystery set up in Part 1, who is Rey related to? Because who is Rey related to, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't matter. The only people it matters to is people who think that, because she's a woman, she needs to have a clear, defined path of where her powers came from. And this whole concept of Anakin being the chosen one and being the most powerful Jedi ever wasn't brought about until Episode 1 in 1998, when The Phantom Menace came out. So Luke being a descendant of that, and thus being able to use the Force to the degree he's able to with very minimal training, doesn't come out until 1999. And that wasn't in response to the question of, how can he do this? It was just, something that happened. It's not people were clamoring and asking, like, Luke doesn't know, Luke didn't have enough training to be able to do what he did. He's just, he's just Luke. He's the hero. It's understood. Meanwhile, Rey comes along, we need to have an explanation as to where Rey had her powers, who gave them to her. It's like, did a man approve of this? And it's like, the whole thing is stupid. The whole thing is nonsense. Thank you, Max Landis. And really, the resolution of this ultimately being that Rey is a Palpatine is not developed enough because he didn't just take what was given to him. And that's the big problem, is that JJ must have had an idea when he wrote the Force Awakens how he wanted this to end, how in his mind this was going to end based on where he went. And then Rian Johnson kind of threw the whole thing out the window. And that's not a knock on The Last Jedi. I actually like a lot of the decisions The Last Jedi made. Because, like, that's just, how it is. It's like, we don't knock Obi-Wan and, we don't knock Obi-Wan or Anakin for, or Obi-Wan or Yoda for going into exile after they fail, but we, like, Luke does it and all of a sudden it's the worst thing on the planet. Like, the thing is, every character coming out of that movie basically had a trajectory of where they were going to go. Poe learns humility, and he learns what it means to be a leader, to make tough decisions, and not just go in hot-headed and just be do what he wants to do. Finn has found his family, and he has found something to, he has found, a common ground. Like, that scene with Phasma, when he clocks her in the head and he says rebel scum, that should have been where we're going from here. That scene perfectly sums up his entire arc in that movie, where he starts out, he's trying to run away, and he ends the movie, and he's like, no, this is what I'm doing. This is my family. This is what I'm going to do from now on. And that's why, like, that was, like, I didn't have an issue with The Last Jedi. Then this movie comes. This movie just doesn't want to accept the ending given to it from The Last Jedi. So it has to spend a good amount of the movie building back to the point where JJ wanted to be going into Episode 9, and then go from there further and finish out the saga. And when they announced the beginning of this, I don't think they're going to be able to sum up 8 Star Wars movies in this one movie based on where The Last Jedi ended off. I was kind of right. I didn't think they'd be able to do it, and quite honestly, I don't think they did. Because here's the issue. You don't take your last movie in a 9-movie series and take the first 2/3 of it and turn it into a MacGuffin quest. Okay? And I know what you're going to say. You have filleted Avengers Endgame, and Avengers Endgame is basically a giant MacGuffin quest for most of the movie, and then there's a giant fight. Here's the thing, though, with Avengers Endgame, and why Avengers Endgame is different from this. In the Avengers, the entire movie prior was about using the MacGuffins to wipe out half the universe. In the beginning of the movie, they say they can't do it anymore. Then they discover time travel, and they're able to do it through time travel. If we look at this, the entire movie is about trying to find a map. That's literally what the movie is. It's Rey needs to find a map to get to the final fight. Like, that is, like, and the thing is, too, Palpatine didn't need to return. Supreme Leader Kylo would have been a great way to end this out. Like, that would have been an ideal way to end the story. It's her versus Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren is now the bad guy. She needs to defeat the last Skywalker. I don't know. I feel like this movie had so many missed opportunities, because it's not missed opportunities where it's a poorly executed version of what should have been. It's just what should have been was pushed entirely to the side in favor of doing something entirely different that doesn't make sense based on a narrative where the story was up until that point. Because, and the thing is, too, it's like, they spend all this time showing you, like, oh, all of these things are manned by children, and they abducted children and turned them into stormtroopers, and then it's like, oh, let's just murder them anyway. It's like, the Knights of Ren has to be the dumbest thing they've ever hyped up in the history of film, where it's like, they spent so much time before The Force Awakens came out hyping up the Knights of Ren, only to have them show up for 3 seconds in The Force Awakens, never get referenced in The Last Jedi, and then have them die like punks to Kylo Ren, or I'm sorry, to Ben in this movie. And then it's like they introduced force healing, like it's some new concept, like we never heard of it before. Like Ki-Adi Mundi wasn't known for it around the time of the prequels. Oh wait, no, we throw away the entire extended universe. Like, force healing is not a new ability. Like, I just don't understand. Like, there's so much here that they introduce, and they're like, "Oh, we did this," and it's like, forget the fact that force healing is a video game ability, relatively common, because of the fact that it's a video game. You need a way to quickly restore your health. In the books and in the movies and everything like that, there was force healing. And as someone pointed out, it's like, well, imagine they had the force healing. Imagine like anyone discovered force healing in the prequels. It breaks the entire prequel. Like, because like, I just don't. This whole thing was just so poorly executed, and like, I just feel like the whole thing where it's like the ruins of the Death Star was so stupid, and you could have just like, it's in the Imperial Vault. Oh, okay, where's the Imperial Vault? Coruscant? No, it's not. It's on the ruins of the Death Star on another moon of Endor. What the hell? And it's like and somehow the ancient Sith holocron, the ancient Sith dagger, had a thing you can pull out of the side like a compass or a protractor, and it lines up perfectly with the ruins of the Death Star. First of all, how did that happen? And second of all, how the hell did it happen when there was no corrosion over the 35 years where the Death Star just been laying there in the middle of the ocean? Like, I know that's nitpicky, but like, there's so many poor decisions that were made here that could have been just entirely omitted just by going in a slightly different direction. And because like, had they just gone to Coruscant, like, oh, it's in the Imperial Vault. Oh, the Imperial Vault would be in the Imperial Palace on Coruscant. That makes sense, and we know the Imperial Palace exists because the Thrawn books take place in them for a good amount of the time. It's just so poorly managed. It's just I just don't get it. And then it's like the Rey Palpatine twist on top of that is one of those things like Khan, like Arkham Knight, where it's like, we guessed that very early on because like they made a big fucking stink about it, where it's like they talk about in what was it, the first of the Thrawn books from 1990, the first of the Timothy Zahn's Thrawn books, where on Dagobah there is the Dark Side Cave, and the Dark Side Cave is there because it's a strong source of the dark side. That's why Yoda goes there, because it offsets and neutralizes so they can't find it. Meanwhile, in Aftermath, or one of the Aftermath books, they talk about how there's, on Jakku, there is a similar thing, but for the light side, designed to hide the dark side. So then we put Rey there. And the thing is, too, the other thing that I was thinking about today when I was getting ready was the first indication we get that Rey is related to Palpatine is her using Force lightning to blow up the transport that doesn't have Chewbacca on it. And why was that not in The Force Awakens? Because that was a movie that J.J. Abrams made. And the thing is, he spends all his time telling us, oh, she's not related to Palpatine, she's not related to Palpatine. It's like when Star Trek Into Darkness happened, and everyone guessed that Benedict Cumberbatch is playing Khan, and he's like, no, he's not Khan, and then the movie came out, he's like, oh, I tricked you guys, he's Khan. It's like, no, you didn't. A trick is, a narrative twist works when you can have something that kind of, sets it up, and it's like outright telling us, no, that's not it, and then when it comes out, we were right the whole time. That's not a trick. That's just you lying. The same thing happened with Rocksteady with Arkham Knight, where Arkham Knight was made his debut, and everyone was like, oh, okay, he's going to be Jason Todd. And then Rocksteady was like, no, he's not Jason Todd. And it's like, all right, I don't know who it is then. Then the game comes out, it turns out he's Jason Todd, and it's like, oh, wow, we tricked you. No, you didn't. You lied. We guessed that. You explicitly said that was not happening, and then it happened anyway. That's just lying. That's different. So The Rise of Skywalker was ultimately a disappointing end. And the thing is, too, there were two scenes at the end of the movie that I've talked about this in the Beware of Spoilers episode. There were two scenes in the beginning of the movie that were very obvious, at the end of the movie, that were very obviously cut in and reshot during, during reshoots. And someone made an edit of one of the scenes. And one of them is all the ships showing up at the end to help fight. When Poe's like, I thought we could do it, but we're alone out here. We're all alone in the galaxy. And then Lando shows up and he's like, you're not alone. And then we turn around, we see all the ships. someone cut in like clips from the various TV shows and movies where it's like where it's like it's all of everyone calling out their call signs, and it's like that would have been so much cooler and so much better to have in that scene. It would have resonated a lot more. But it's like all of it, it's like, oh, and it like they're not just a bunch of nameless ships. And it's like, oh, the Tantive 4 is there. Oh, cool. That's the only one that's got a name. And like maybe the Ghost is there too. Like if you did that, that would have made that scene work a little bit better. Like Alphabet Squadron shows up, like Rogue Squadron, which I think is still a thing even in the new canon. I mean, Wedge was there, but like, come on, like the whole thing was just so poorly, like it's a poorly executed version. And I tweeted, I was like, when they did it initially on in the Avengers, it resonated emotionally, and the reason why is because we cared about all these characters. That scene doesn't resonate because we don't care about any of these people because there's no names or anything attached to them. It's just a bunch of ships. You can only recognize like 3 of them. Like, you have this cool moment where it's like they show up and they're like, oh, cool, okay, they're not all going to die right here, but that's about it. And the other moment is when Rey is fighting Palpatine, and Palpatine says, I am all the Sith, and then Rey says, and I am all the Jedi. I rolled my eyes so hard at that, because that was another thing that was very obviously added in after the response to, I am inevitable, and I am Iron Man. Very, very obvious. And it's like, I just, they could have just not done that. They could have, there's no shortage of ways they could have just not done it, and it would have been much better. And the thing is, too, it's like, bring in the Force Ghosts for that scene. Like, God, like, I just don't, there's just so much that they just completely failed on. Especially with the sequels. I don't know if they knew going into the sequels that this was going to be the end of the saga. They were going to be ending with Episode 9. They weren't going to do it 10, 11, 12, or any number of other movies after that. I don't know if they knew that or not, but if they knew that going in, and there's very minimal reference to the prequels, it's like they almost didn't happen entirely. It's like they're willing to completely ignore them because of the fact that people now are only clinging to them because they don't like the sequel so much. And literally, that's just how Star Wars has always been, where it's like, Episode 6 comes out, and everyone hated Episode 6. And they're like, okay, Episodes 4 and 5 were better. Then the prequels come out, everyone's like, even Episode 6 was good because the prequels happened. Then the Clone Wars movie happens, and everyone loves the prequels. And then the same thing happens when the sequels come out. Now everyone loves the prequels. Now when this High Republic trilogy comes out in the 2020s, everyone's going to turn back to the sequel trilogy and be like, oh, I love the sequel trilogy. Because that's nostalgia. Star Wars is fueled by nostalgia, and it's why it doesn't resonate in China. Because in China, they didn't have Star Wars in the 70s, so there's no emotional touchstone for them to go and see the movie in the same way that the United States has it. And, you know, the international territories that were accepting foreign movies at the time. And that's why it always does so poorly in China. And I feel like that was a tangent, but we didn't need to go there. So if you have not seen Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, I would recommend you watch it. If for no other reason, you just watch. This isn't even by JJ standards a good ending. Even by his standards, not a good ending. So yeah. Quick note: we have. Actually, we'll put that at the end of the episode. We'll do it at the end. So we have another thing I want to talk about, a YouTube series that I found courtesy of a Twitter account called Local58. And I really like this YouTube channel. I'm a fan of kind of surrealist, dread-building horror. And this channel does it well. It's kind of, it's like on The Office, they talk about cinema of the unsettling and that one thing. You feel like you're watching something you shouldn't be watching. This is something, and the thing is, too, the narrative storytelling of this YouTube channel with these short episodes is so well done. First of all, let me set the stage here. Local 58 is designed to be a local access television station from like the late 80s, early 90s, you can tell. I'm not going to spoil it because I feel like a lot of people haven't seen it, so I don't want to spoil the movie, the channel, but maybe if I can get one of the guys who makes it on, we'll talk about it more in depth. Some of the more creative decisions to go into it, but like the first one, I'll talk about the first episode. First episode is called Contingency, and what it is, it's the end of the night, and the sign off happens, and you get this emergency alert from the government, and they start playing this version of the the national anthem that's warped, like it's old. And this thing is designed, and this thing is, from the time of Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson signature at the end of the first thing, and it's like, my fellow Americans, I regret to inform you that despite our best efforts of our citizens and our might, the might of our military, we have been overrun by enemy forces, and we have unilaterally surrendered, which is why it is time for all Americans to do their part. And rest assured, me and my family have already done. So we are asking all Americans to do it as well. And it is so beautifully written, the ensuing orders for everyone to kill themselves, that it feels like a real PSA. And because of that, because of how real and how much it feels, how real it feels as it's airing, you get this sense of dread that this is something the government would actually make. And there are a lot of things that they introduce here that come into play later on in some of the other episodes, where it's like, I'm not going to talk about what specifically talks about that plays in later, but like it gets increasingly creepy. It's like, use whatever's nearby. A firearm is best. If you have time, go out in your front yard and assume the victory position and lay down and put the gun under your chin and keep your feet together. And then it's like there was that. There was if you have children or pets, tend to them first, then yourself. And one of the things that really stuck with me was one of the lines, infants and pets, the littlest patriots. And it's so horrifying, but at the same time, so beautifully done. This YouTube channel. And that's not the only video. They have other videos where it's like, one of them feels a lot like Welcome to Night Vale, where it's like you sit down and you're watching it. And it's a weather alert. Do not go outside. Do not look at the sky. Do not look at any mirrors. And then it starts getting like messed up, and then it's like a military alert. Do not go outside. Do not look at the sky. And then it's like, go outside and look at the sky, because whatever it was got to the person. There's another one where it's like it's just a video of a guy following a GPS, and you just hear the GPS, and it's like, turn this way, turn this way, turn this way, and then it's like eventually goes off road, and it's like, in 50 feet, turn off your headlights. And then it's like, as the person pulls up to it, there's like some creature standing in the road in front of them. Oh my God, it's so good. If you have not watched this YouTube channel, you have to check it out. They do really good work over there. What was the other thing? There was one other one I wanted to talk about. And watch them in order. Because when you get to the end, the payoff on the end, if you catch all the little tidbits they put through everything, really pays off very well. When you get to the end, it's very worth it. I don't know if to do a new episode still. I'll look into that. We'll talk about it more next week if they are. I was going to talk about more about Tron Legacy. Well, let me finish up what we're talking about here. But like, definitely check out Local58 on YouTube. Definitely worth your time to check that channel out. I was going to talk about Tron Legacy, because I did finish Tron Legacy, but based on what I saw in the first half of the movie, there's nothing to be added from the second half of the movie that really, like, there was nothing there that makes it redeemable. Everything good happens in the first half of the movie. So yeah, nothing to really add on those thoughts. A few quick housekeeping announcements from us. Every Thursday when the podcast goes up, I'll be doing a giveaway on Twitter for the movie that we have this week. So this week, The movie is Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. So if you go on Twitter account, there is a tweet there. If you follow the Twitter account at 30minreview and retweet the tweet, you get entered to win a digital copy of the movie. Next week, we're going to be talking about Little Women. So that movie will be given away for free next week. And by 1 in the morning, we should have a winner. And the winner will have the code DM to them. Basically, what happens is we close it off at midnight tonight. So at 11:59, going into 4:10, we close off entries. And then by I should be able to pick someone at random by that point. Also, we have 2 new other ways to support the podcast coming out in the next few weeks. We had already the Muses coming out, which is the end of the Swan Song trilogy. If you have not started it yet, you can pick up Swan Song by going to tiny.cc/swansong, all one word, SWANSONG. We do have 2 more books. We have The Muses, which is the end of that trilogy. Tiny.cc/The Muses. You can pre-order it on Amazon. That will be a fun one. That will be the end of that story. And then we also have another one this is one that was a little bit of a surprise that I was working on. I came up with this concept based on a tweet I saw. Kind of, not really. It was kind of like, what would you do with a certain character? And I was thinking about it, and I came up with this. The book is called Our Past Does Not Define Us. That comes out on April 27th. You can pre-order that by going to tiny.cc/OPDNDU, because the title was too long to do as a full tiny URL. But yeah, so if you want to pick up the old books, tiny.cc/swansong, tiny.cc/duet, tiny.cc/the Muses, that entire trilogy, and then tiny.cc/OPDNDU is Our Past Does Not Define Us. It's a little bit of a departure from what we usually do. And next week's episode will be Little Women. Greta Gerwig's version that came out this year. I just picked it up on DVD. We'll be giving out a digital copy next Thursday. If you're listening to this on 4/9/2020, the day the episode drops, you can go ahead and go to my Twitter account at 30minreview. If you go on there, you can follow the Twitter account and retweet the tweet about the giveaway. You do get entered to win a copy of Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. So until then, have a great rest of your week. We'll be back next week. Same time, same channel.